All right, my name is Sean Fallon, and you're listening to episode 21, Dexter. Welcome to From First to Last. Hello again and welcome again. My name is Sean Fallon. This is From First to Last. Today, my guest, he's a serial killer, he's a dark passenger, and he's the host of the Digging 6 Feet Under podcast. He is Victor Rubio. Hello, Victor. How are you?
Hey Sean, what's going on, man?
I'm good. And glad to have you on the show. What show did you choose for us?
I chose Dexter. Dexter, I have a very strong love-hate relationship with Dexter. It's one of
Yeah.
my favorite shows, and it's one of the shows I probably hate the most. And I think your podcast specifically, because you have a great premise, and there's nothing that illustrates a show better than the first episode and the last episode. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
I definitely think like this is one of those shows that is custom made for this premise for this
Yeah,
podcast.
it
Like,
really is.
so Dexter ran for 96 episodes from 2006 to 2013. Ran for 8 seasons. Victor, what is your experience with Dexter?
My experience with Dexter, and I think a lot of people could relate to this, is I caught on Dexter at the end of season 3. So you want to say that was 2008, and I'm sorry, I started watching right up to 2009, right before the season 4 started. And obviously, if you're a fan of Dexter, you know season 4 was the Trinity Killer, which just exploded Dexter. But my experience, the beginning experience was, you know, I had watched 6 Feet Under, obviously, which I do the podcast, so I knew about Michael C. Hall. And just right before that season 4 started, Dexter, they had done these advertisements. I don't know if you had ever seen them, where it's Dexter recreating magazines, but they had like a dark twist on them. He did some pretty popular magazines. He did the Rolling Stone, Wired, GQ, Vanity, US
Okay.
Weekly, and he would just be on there, your typical Rolling Stone cover, but he kind of had like the dead hand from season 1 on him. And I saw that and I was
Right.
like, "Oh, this is gimmicky." I know, I only knew Michael C. Hall from that, and you see that. Once I watched it, I was, "Wow, this show is great." And when I was saying is that people could relate, is this was the first show I binge watched. It's kind of
Yeah.
when Netflix started exploding, and I vividly remember as I'm saying it, as the words are coming out of my mouth, me and my sister, literally as one episode would end, we would press
Yeah.
play, and just kept going and going and going until you have your season 4, the Trinity Killer, and then I watched it live with everyone else.
Yeah, no, my experience was quite similar, but the binge watching was the death of the show for me.
Oh, really? So you caught on after everything had happened?
Yeah, so what happened to us was like I think I'd watched the first half of the first season with my mum, and then I moved overseas, and me and my girlfriend were living with a guy from California, and
Okay.
he said to us, "Oh yeah, you've got to go into Dexter. Like season four's just finished, and the ending of season four will blow your fucking mind." And we're like, "Oh, cool, cool, cool. Let's get caught up." And then we kind of like no one else had watched the first season, so I was like, "Okay, we'll start from the start." Sorry, my girlfriend at the time, wife now, like she hadn't watched any of it, so we started from the start, and we binged through it just like you say one after another. As soon as one finished, next one started, and we binged. Got to the end of season three, like the Jimmy Smith season,
Right.
and then Jarrett, our roommate, moved out, and I
Okay.
think we watched the first episode of season four, but we were just exhausted from the show. And then we just didn't. We were like, okay, we were like, wait, let's take a step back and we'll give it like a month, and then we'll jump back into it. And then I think in that month, that was enough time for us to sort of be like, hold on, is this show shit? you know? And then by that point, we just never got back into it. It was like, oh no, the
That's
cracks.
so
We could just
funny.
we saw all the cracks then, and we're like, oh no, and then yeah, we never like. Eventually, I think we YouTubed the final moments of season four just to see what it was,
Right.
and we were like, "Oh shit, no, that's pretty horrific." But no, never got back into it after that. Like, and it was incredible for me to just sort of see the show just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I was like, okay, season 4 is like, yeah, you say that's where the Trinity Killer and John Lithgow and all that, and that's where it blew
Right.
up. And then the next one there was another season, and that didn't get good reviews, and then another season that got shit reviews, and so on. And it just didn't seem to die, and then obviously it just sort of like limped to the finish. But just to seg from that, watching the pilot today it's such a good pilot.
I mean, it's what grabs people in. And you know what's even crazier about it, and I know your podcast is the pilot episode and the finale episode, but if I was screening this for you and I was going to pitch you a show, I could show you just the intro.
Yeah.
Just that opening scene, and you would say, "Give me more. I want to know what, you know."
Yeah.
You know, we're going to talk about the rest of the episode. Just even how it opens is just it's great, you know? Like you said, it's a really great pilot episode.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's like those like first 10 minutes where he drives around and he goes and gets Mike Donovan and he kills him and all that. You couldn't watch that, and if you were someone who I guess didn't like violence or something like that, maybe that would be a turnoff. But like,
Of course.
just watching that today, I was sort of like, yeah, I'll throw Dexter on, I'll get this all watched for the podcast. But I was enthralled. Like he's like 10 minutes in, he just had me.
Yeah, he
And
grips
it's
you.
such a strong. It's I think it's very good as well. Like that first sort of scene, that first murder. It's very meticulous in the sense of like, oh well, he's killed children, so it's very clear that Dexter is murdering people, but he's a goodie. Like it's very quickly established. Like the two murders in that first episode are a guy who's killed children and a serial rapist. So both of those people, you are like, oh yeah, fuck these guys. I hope Dexter kills them. You know, and you're sort of on his side.
You know, I want to say, when you were talking earlier, I'm so glad we can curse here because there is no way I could talk about the finale and not curse. So I'm just so glad I'm allowed to curse. But to get back to your point, if you wanna take a trip back in time, that this pilot aired in 2006, and we were kind of just we're actually dealing towards the end of The Sopranos, and the reason why I bring up The Sopranos is because that was the first show that had your big anti-hero. You know, you're gonna root for Tony Soprano if you had watched it, and he's a horrible person, but we're still rooting for him. And just like you're saying, the two people he kills in this pilot episode, it's a brilliant setup because, like you said, who doesn't want someone who have to kill a child killer and this rapist? So right from the start, it's brilliant how we place. You know, we're cheering on a serial killer. What I would also say is, and I'm going to try as much to stick to the first and last. That's also what kind of brings this show down, is that every single person he ends up killing, there's no gray. It's good, bad, and there's nothing else. And we watch television for, to kind of tickle our intelligence, and that kind of, it sticks to that script of this person is undeniably bad, he's definitely guilty, Dexter kills him, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that's a great example as well of, like, Tony Soprano, like, that sort of trend of like Dexter, Tony Soprano, Don Draper in Mad Men, and obviously Walter White in Breaking Bad and stuff like that. And I think the thing that like the reason that sort of like Soprano, Draper, and White are held in such high regard is that they did live in that gray area. Like so many times, Tony Soprano did stuff, and you're like, no, I can't sympathize with this. I can't, this is against my moral code. But you sort of. You want to see what's going to happen next. I mean, Walter White was the worst for that, like just doing things that were just evil. But you find some part of you. Or it depends. I mean, I had murder with my family talking about Breaking Bad. Because I sympathized with Walter White right up to the end. And they were like, no, he's a baddie, he deserves this. But, there was some kernel of sympathy that I had for him. But then the thing with, like you say, with Dexter... You have that sort of forced on you because there's not like a point where he kills someone that I saw the episodes I watched. He never kills anyone where you're like, oh, he shouldn't have done that,
Yeah, and I want to say it's great that you can have we could literally ditch the podcast we're doing right now and we could just talk about Walter White's ambiguity of good or bad. We have maybe 2 minutes of discussion of whether Dexter good or bad is, and just like how you're saying. There's no wiggle room. Good, bad. There's nothing there. Dexter does end up killing. It's not. He doesn't kill anyone that you maybe know or don't know. He kills someone by accident. But again, I'm gonna go back to when I saying how the fact that there's no wiggle room of the black or white, Dexter kills is bad. That was swept under the rug rather quickly. He killed someone by accident, and it was supposed to mean to shake up his world because he follows the code. But I mean, 30 minutes into the next episode, it's completely forgotten, and that's a huge drag to a character that we're saying good or bad. And then, that really stuff like that is what brought down the show, but we're still sticking to the pilot. So,
well, I will saying that I will jump around a little bit because there was an episode in it was the first episode of the fourth season, I think, and Dexter. I think they've just had a baby, and Dexter isn't getting any sleep.
Right.
So he keeps making mistakes, and I think he's giving testimony in a trial, and he makes a mistake, and the guy gets off.
Right.
And one of the dickhead cops is like giving him abuse for it. So he chases the guy down and he kills him. But the thing with that was like, and I think that was one thing that did annoy me about the show after a point, because it was very selfish what Dexter was doing. Like, it was sort of presented as if he was this hero taking these people out of the world, like removing these bad people. But there were certain circumstances where you're like, yeah, but this person, you're killing them and you're hiding the body. So the family of the victim are just going to assume this person's got away with it and has never been seen again. The only person who's getting satisfaction from this act is you. But and that in itself is quite an interesting idea, that he's sort of like convinced himself he's doing this good thing, but it's just selfishness. But I don't think the show ever scratched the surface on that. I think that was just something that I felt when I was watching the show, or other people felt. And I don't know, maybe there was episodes I missed I should have watched, but there was that thing as well of like, yeah, there's no grey area, but I feel like you're not doing a heroic act, you're just selfishly doing it for yourself, for your own hero complex. But the show just didn't get into that.
Right, and you know what's funny, and I never could do enough research to find out what exactly happened. Do you have any memory of season 7, or you've never?
Oh, I didn't see any of that. I don't know which one that was.
Season 7, it's to set it up, and if we're doing the first and last, these are no spoilers. You know this already, and if you're listening to this episode having never watched Dexter, I'm gonna spoil the shit out of everything right now. The end of season 6. Deb walks in on Dexter killing someone, and that's that season's cliffhanger. So season 7 starts out where Deb and Dexter are like, who the fuck are you? Know, you were this saint for me this entire time. Who the hell are you? You're this serial killer, and kind of everything unravels. And I'm bringing that up to say that they did scratch the surface of, there's an exact scene where Deb is like, You're selfish. You're doing this for you. You're not thinking about your kids. You're not thinking about anything. You got Rita killed. They scratched it. But what happened? And again, it's one of my biggest gripes with this show is they never went anywhere with it. It didn't affect Dexter in any way. Maybe for a few scenes in that episode, but they never took it anywhere. So they did scratch that surface, and season 7, one of the common complaints of season 7 is that they started, Dexter finally got caught by someone who's living. It's not someone who's going to die in a few episodes. Dexter got caught, and they started toying that with you, and then it went nowhere, you know, and that's just stuff like that's what brought the show down. I feel like I keep talking about what brought the show down, and I feel like I keep moving the podcast away from the pilot. So please go on and direct me the right way, Sean.
Okay, let's come back to the pilot. Let's stay positive, and let's talk about the good things. Like you say, it's that sort of, like, in my notes here, there was something I really loved, like when they sort of established Dexter and sort of a lot of his points of, like, his code and so forth, and like, they make a big point of him having the blood slide and that he's the blood splatter guy and so on. But then, like, I love that scene where he finds, he goes into the swimming pool and they've got the body that's been chopped up and completely drained of blood. Right. And Michael C. Hall, like, I think, you see him in great things, and I think he will. I hope he does do great things, because I think he's amazing. He's amazing in 6 Feet Under. He's amazing in this episode, at least, this pilot. Because he just, like, I was trying to write down all of his sort of, like, emotions when he's looking at this body, and he's, like, scared, impressed, amused, but also sort of, like, offended that someone's done something he hasn't thought of. And
Right.
it's all there. Like the voiceover does some of the legwork, but just in his face, you can just see it all of just like, what is this? Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love it, but I hate it, but I don't, you know. And I think
Like,
that they do that very well.
you know what's funny, and it's something I took away from this first season, and I'll stick to the pilot. But he sort of, and because he has this whole messed up dynamic, Michael, well, rather Dexter, he's kind of a little kid.
Mm.
Because in just the way in this pilot how he reacts with Rita and everything, and just how he talks about his feelings, he's like a little kid. And how, like you said, when he sees those body parts, it's he doesn't know how to react. And it would be like a little kid, if they didn't understand how you took their nose and it looks like you have their nose or something.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, wait a second, how'd you do that? That's amazing. Wait, where's my nose? And you put it perfectly that his reactions when he's looking at the body parts is, what is this? To further your point, I think Michael C. Hall, this is probably his greatest body of work. Don't take the show into it. Him, the actor, Dexter.
Mm.
And just like you said, just these first few scenes, he just really grips you. He's such a great actor for this show.
Yeah, no, like very much so. Like because obviously, like David in 6 Feet Under is fantastic, and he takes some of that into Dexter. Like there's a lot of repression and there's a mask up and all that, but
Exactly.
but he's not playing the exact same character. He's just like there's shades of the same thing, but like where David is sort of he's sort of happy in his sort of hidden life, like with Keith and all that, and then his life with his family, like his forward facing life, is
Right.
quite dour and quite serious. But then the Dexter thing's flipped. So in his sort of like forward facing, he's like donuts, and he's flirty and he's jokey, but like his actual self, he's just a shell of a human being who's just like unable to feel, and he's faking it. And I think there's a very interesting sort of parallel with Michael C. Hall's previous work. I think, like you say, that's a perfect example. That idea of him being like a child, like it's like you say with Rita, he doesn't really know how to talk to her, and he doesn't really know how to react in terms of like sexuality and things like that.
Right.
And then the final scene where he like sees the head on the fridge and the doll, and
Right.
even like the language he uses where he's like, oh, let's play a game. It's quite
Right.
immature and all that. When you're thinking like, yeah, this dude's just come into your house and put a chopped up Barbie doll in your freezer. There's things are gonna get weird. And yeah, and I think talking about it in terms of just like broad terms as a pilot.
Right.
I finished watching that and I was like, fuck, I feel like just watching 4 more of these. It's like,
Yeah.
no, don't get dragged into it. Because like you say, it doesn't go... Like, that first season is a masterclass. I think it's brilliant. But
Yeah.
I love that idea of the just straight away establishing this killer as being, like, the anti-Dexter. Bloodless, showy, confident. Whereas Dexter's very... it's Dexter without the code, I guess.
Right. It's like you said, perfect. An anti-Dexter, just the opposite of what he is. There's all this blood in the first scene, and there's all this that, and he hides the bodies. This in our next scene, he leaves the bodies there just so everyone could see, and he even says that. That's a great point that I never even picked up with the pilot. Is just how opposite that the two that they show you, just at least in this pilot.
Yeah, and I think that it's such a creative idea as well, like the idea of the bloodless, like it's something new, like it's something you've never really seen before, and
Right.
it works so well in this show. It's not really like, oh, let's just think of some crazy serial killer and we'll just chuck it in Dexter. It's written very specifically, as we've just said, to be the complete opposite of him, and to present sort of like a challenge, but also I can't think of like he's like, okay, he's challenged by this guy, but he's also enticed by it. It's like, oh, this is someone.
Right.
This could be a kindred spirit.
And to your point, you see it later when Dexter's talking to Deb at the restaurant about who this guy is, and you see that scene where Dexter is kind of like touching the water, his glass of water, because he's just so intrigued by just the idea of this. And we're to presume, as the audience, just within this pilot, is he's never seen anything close to this.
Yeah.
This is something unlike he's ever seen. And yeah, that's a great point. That it just grips you within this pilot, you know.
Yeah, because it. I mean, I think this is something I think we will discuss probably more in terms of the finale. But like having watched so many pilots for this podcast, I think it is good. Like when you do watch a really really good a good pilot,
Yeah.
it's majority questions. You know, it's you should get to the end of the episode and just have like some interesting like. I think I sort of set out the rules for a pilot with like it should tell a complete sort of compelling story in itself, but it should also make you want more.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
should also create a world that you think, oh yeah, I'd spend 12 hours here. And I
Yeah.
think this, it probably doesn't have the full, complete beginning, middle, and end, but you do get the two murders, which sort of do provide you with that.
Right.
But at the end of it, you're like, cool, who's this killer? How's Dexter going to find him? What's going on with Rita? Where does Deb come into this? How does this, you know, and there's so much stuff, and you're just like, oh yeah, no, I 100% need to watch the next one and see where this is going. And it's for a show that, as we've said a few times, sort of completely went off and didn't work. This pilot is masterful. Just
Yeah.
just as like 50 minutes of TV. I watched it today and I was just completely drawn in. And one of the things actually that I put in my notes that I really liked was how much they do put a lot of time into establishing setting. Like it's very, very Miami. You know,
That's
it's,
yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I wanted to discuss about that is Miami, and I do have to extend this to the first, I'll say season and a half of season 2, but Miami in this pilot alone, definitely like Miami should be in the cast of characters.
Yeah.
You know, Michael C. Hall, Dexter, Jennifer Carpenter, Deb. It should be Miami because Miami is absolutely a character, and it's so Miami, and it really sets the tone and for the show that it is Miami, and that's a great point that you brought up. I always just said that it was Miami is a character in the show without a doubt.
yeah, it's great because, and I think that's definitely something that's starting to happen more and more with like TV set in America, where because I remember pretty much when I was growing up, TV shows were set in LA or they were set in New York.
Yeah, it's one or the
With
other.
with a few little things like if it wasn't New York, then it was Boston, you know,
Yeah.
or something like that. But it's cool to see like obviously the Fargo TV show is very very Minnesota. Like
Yeah.
it's not just set in that place because they get like good tax breaks to film there or whatever. It's very much like you say a character. It's very much in the fabric. And this as well, Dexter. There's something because it's in Miami. It creates a bit of a weird thing for obviously for me. Like I'm an English person watching this in Australia, and I've never been to Miami. Like Miami is something that's quite mysterious to me. So to have this idea of this guy sort of trawling around, killing all these people, and you're like, and for me, I'm like, so what is the crime rate like in Miami? I think Miami is only something that I've seen in like Scarface and stuff like that. You know, I don't really know. How big is it? That kind of thing. So that completely puts me as like an outsider. It sort of puts me off guard because I don't really like if the show was set in New York, I'd be like, well, no, he can't do this. I know what New York's like. You know, New York's got detectives everywhere. You know, and so on. Like,
Right, and you know, and to your point about that, and I wanted to say that you know the show, the reason why I wanted to be a guest on this particular show is I was and am a huge Dexter fan, and this first when I was explaining earlier how me and my sister we had binge watched the first few seasons, it actually opened my eye to possibly living in Miami because I was like, ooh, this is weird. It intrigued me, and
okay.
Miami is it's almost a parody of a real city because it is a real city, but you know this show is somewhat dated because this we're talking 10 years ago now. But in these first few episodes, they definitely nailed down Miami. I live just right outside of Miami, and there's a lot, and they move away from it later on in the later seasons. But there's a lot of the Cuban influence, and you see it here in the pilot that there's some of that Spanglish going on, and that's a very Miami thing where two people are talking. Almost every other person you deal with is Cuban or Spanish, whatnot. And that is such a nice nod to Miami that the whole Spanglish thing, and you have Angel Batista, who we meet, and LaGuerta, and there's a scene where they speak Spanish really quick, and that's so Miami. You need to know Spanish to live in Miami, even if you are an English American or whatever. It's a way of life in Miami, and the show nails it. The pilot nails it perfectly. I definitely like that part of it.
Yeah, no, like you say, there's very much that thing, I think, where Dexter comes in and he, I think he gives Angel a donut, and then they have like a very, very quick sort of like you say, like a quick Spanish conversation, but very much basic, like tourist Spanish.
Right.
My family lives in Valencia in Spain, so I've been to Spain many, many times, and I could understand what they were saying, but that's based on
your history.
I was there with a phrase book, and I was like, por favor, de nada. They're like very easy Spanish.
Right.
But very, like, my mum and dad have moved to have a house in Spain, and they sort of go back and forth from England to Spain. And their Spanish is like that. Like, they're confident, but they don't know that much.
Right.
And it's a very realistic point. It's good because it's if Dexter didn't speak any Spanish, it wouldn't, I wouldn't like that. But if he just came in speaking like fluent Spanish, I'm not sure I like that.
Right. It's
I quite like that middle
mix.
ground.
Yeah. And as he's a white guy, whatever his ethnicity is, we don't know, but he's a white guy for however you want to classify him, and that's exactly how he would be in Miami. Spanglish. Yeah. Spanglish is the best. I don't know if you ever heard that phrase, but it's Spanglish. It's Spanish.
Yeah.
English.
Spanish English.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, and it's great. I think it's the thing of like that first episode is a nice amount of like world building.
Yes,
like
absolutely.
They spend a lot of time sort of establishing those little pieces, like even just the thing with the donuts. Like when he comes in with the donuts and then he says, "Hey Don, how's the family?" And then someone says something and he tells like a really cheesy joke and everyone laughs and he just goes around. You're like, yeah, this is the guy who, when they find out he's a serial killer, everyone's like, I never suspected.
Exactly.
He was the nice guy around the office. He always had a nice thing to say, And that sort of plays into being like quite a fun couple of scenes, but it establishes Dexter's just general life alibi.
He's so charismatic, and he's such a people pleaser. And then I could cut that right there and just show him, screaming at the guy, I'll cut your fucking eyelids right off.
Yeah, that's
There's
it.
just and that's boiling right below the surface, and that's intriguing for a pilot alone, like we're talking about. That's intriguing. I want more of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. As well, it's an interesting point to start with the murder rather than because it would be very easy, a little bit lazy, but very easy to start with just the show. He comes in with donuts, they go to a crime scene, there's no blood. You get a hint that there's something wrong with him, but you don't know what it is, and it ends with the murder. That's the cliffhanger of the first episode. But it's good that they just come straight out the gate of nah, this is who this character is. You need this to be front and center for every interaction this character will have from now on. And like you say, to have him, that first scene where I wrote something down where the guy starts praying, and Dexter slaps him and says, "That never helped anyone."
Right.
Oh shit! This is not his. This isn't his first rodeo. He's
fully in control. Right.
Yeah, and that's it. And like you say, that thing of threatening to cut his eyelids off and stuff like that. You're like, okay, so this is a very dangerous individual. But then the next scenes, he's
he's on the
wearing
boat,
bright colored clothes. Yeah, he's on the boat. He's got a big smile on his face. He's shouting to the fishermen and stuff like that. And that sort of mask and things, which brings me to a very interesting character who I was always on the fence with, but when he got killed, I think it did take something out of the show, and that's Dokes.
Right.
So when he's introduced as just being an antagonistic bastard, he's just, but then the thing was, when he dies, towards the end of season 2, season 3 never had a character who replaced him.
Right.
I think you needed someone who could just see straight through Dexter, who was a good enough cop to just be nah, this guy is not on the level, and I cannot work out what it is.
There's an interesting, if you talk to your general Dexter fan, who I'm someone who, and of your podcasts that I have listened to, of the shows I listen to, It's TV shows that I watched so many
Mm-hmm.
times I could spit them word for word, and you say, "Hey, what season?" and I know it.
Yeah.
If you take someone who's not like me, you take your casual fan, and you just talk about Dexter. Dokes is one of the first thing that gets brought up, and you said it ran for 96 episodes, while Dokes was only in for 24, and
Yeah.
he had such an impact. The perfect way to describe Dokes, and you just did. He's not on the same level of everyone. He sees right through Dexter.
Yeah.
And there's no bullshit. The first scene he comes in, there's contention between the two of them. There's just tension right there.
Yeah.
Dokes is not fucking around when it comes to Dexter. He doesn't buy everything that we just talked about, how he comes in, he makes the donuts, the cheesy jokes. Dokes is not having any of it. Sees right through him. And that alone, definitely for a pilot, is I want more of that guy talking with Dexter, you know?
Yeah, because I mean, I think that was a complaint as well because of how long the show ran for. There is that weird thing of like he works in a police station surrounded by homicide detectives. They can't be that stupid. You know, there's always that sort of thing with Batman where you're like, Commissioner Gordon must know Bruce Wayne is Batman because he's a very, very good cop. Otherwise,
Right.
the whole character is negated because you're like, no, well, you're shit at your job because it's right in front of you. And then the thing with this is like, Dexter does too many weird things and he's in too many right places at the wrong time. And also he's a bit weird in his own little way. So I think that's the thing, like Dokes represented something that was needed. Like you needed that thing of like someone who is, no, everyone, this guy's a fucking weirdo. What's the deal?
I have to say that, like you said, they killed him off in season 2, and I think there had to be some point in the future where they know they messed up. And what even furthers that point, and again, I'm going to spoil season 7, they bring Dokes back. And it's one of those moments. I don't want to get too into it because I don't want to spoil it for you, but you know, anyone who has watched it, they bring it back just to he comes back in a flashback scene, but he comes back and it's again he sees right through Dexter, and they kind of it's emphasized, and you're never able to recapture that. They tried with a bunch of characters over the seasons, but no one compared to Dexter and Dokes. I'm sorry, and I mean, I don't know. I'm not a writer. I'm not a showrunner. I don't do whatever. But man, what a I don't know any other term than to say that they blew their load with Dokes.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you could have Dokes as a character being that suspicious for how long. You know, you kind of have to do something with that.
Yeah, and I think the thing is as well, like you've got to think that like I think the guy's name's James Manus Jr. I think he's the showrunner. Or it might just be James Manus. Mm-hmm. And he I guess you got to think to yourself, when he made this show and it was a bit of a hit, he couldn't have possibly envisioned it was going to run for 8 seasons.
Yeah, definitely
like,
not.
He's got to be thinking to himself, right, this has got 4 or 5 before they're going to pull the plug. Mm-hmm. So he must have been like, okay, well, we might not get to resolve the Dokes thing, so let's get that out there early in case because you do see that sometimes with a show that they go big quite early, but then the show runs for 4 or 5 more years, and like, oh shit, well, we've already used all the fireworks, so now we've got to try and recreate that. Like, there was the interesting thing, I think, with Dexter of like, and this was something that sort of turned me off the show as well, where it would sort of reset at the end of each season.
Oh,
like
God,
you'd have the serial killer. God. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like the serial killer whatever the new killer would be and they would get killed or whatever at the last episode. And then you'd have to just start the whole thing again.
It was a reset button every season.
Yeah.
Huge misstep. To parallel it with something we've kind of touched about, Breaking Bad was so great, and I think Dexter and Breaking Bad they kind of run the same line, just the anti-hero and whatnot getting caught.
Yeah.
And you see how Breaking Bad literally they start off the same moment that season whatever ended. There's no everyone does not talking about what the hell just happened. A few months ago. It's right off the bat. I wanted to correct you on something because I want to tease it because I wanted to talk about it when we discuss the finale. Okay. The showrunner for the first 4 seasons was actually Clyde Phillips.
Right.
And that's really important. And I'll tell you why once we talk about the finale. But I'm correcting you for that reason.
No,
But
that makes perfect sense. That does make sense that it would switch halfway through. That's okay, cool. Definitely. Well, I mean, to get into the finale a bit,
oh, fuck this
like,
finale. This is why I'm glad I could curse. Fuck this finale.
yeah, I mean, the thing with like, okay, so as I said before, a pilot asks a whole heap of questions, and then the finale is so the pilot asks a load of questions, and then every episode after that essentially makes a promise that the finale has to fulfill. So she used Breaking Bad as the example. Breaking Bad, as soon as you've watched like a couple of years of that and you've still got some seasons to go, you know in your head what the finale has to give you. And with Breaking Bad, you think, okay, the finale has to give me an end to the Walter White story. His empire or his life, something's got to end. In the same way that, say, Mad Men, the
Right.
promise is this needs to give me some resolution to Don Draper's ongoing midlife crisis, his ongoing nervous breakdown. You have to get to the end of it. And the thing with Dexter is the promise that this show gives is that he has to get caught or nearly caught or killed or nearly killed. And then I was watching the finale and I was like, why is this so boring? Why is nothing happening? Why this finale should be the police closing the net on him.
Right. I mean, this finale, it's and again, it's important because when people listen to this podcast, I don't want anyone to think I'm a Dexter hater, that I wanted to come on and shit on Dexter, because I'm telling you, I'm one of the biggest. I went to San Diego Comic-Con, for anyone knows who that is. I went to San Diego Comic-Con just to see the Dexter panel because I was I don't want to say I was in love with the show, but I liked the show. Again, it was one of the inspirations of me moving to Miami. I love the show so much, but this finale, it honestly, whatever stupid list you wanna make and you read, it's one of the worst finales and we just got done talking about the pilot and we couldn't stop talking about how I want more.
Yeah.
We get the finale and it's like, what the hell was this? I'm telling you, there were certain points I was watching the finale for your podcast, I cracked up laughing because it was like, what is this shit? Yeah. When we talk about the finale now, I know if you hadn't seen season 8, it's somewhat important that you have to talk about it going into it, because there was that expectation of, is Dexter going to get caught? Yeah. By the time that this finale rolls around, there's no way he's going to get caught. It's been 7 seasons of him slipping away. This finale if you're into sports, this finale was, you're down 40 in the fourth quarter. There was no way they were able to repair everything they had set up, Yeah,
it's like, I just feel as though, because they knew that season was the last season.
Right.
So you could just have a whole season that just slowly has someone working it out. Like he fucks up, he leaves a bit of evidence or something, and he gets a bit sloppy. And then you just have that, and it builds and builds and builds, and like the analogy I've used a million times on this podcast is like the finale should be, every episode leading up to the finale, if it's like the final season or whatever, should be dominoes getting put up, and the final episode should just be dominoes falling.
Right.
So if you look at like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the final season of that is building up to this final battle, and the last episode is just pretty much the battle. And that's what you want. You want this whole thing of like, we're going to build. So like there's nothing. It's very slow. There's no pace to it. It doesn't
boring.
make sense. Yeah, and then like Deb gets shot, then she's fine, and then she's just dead. Like the poor actress just doesn't get anything. Like that scene where she's been shot at the start and she's like trying to talk, I was like, God, that's really affecting work from that actress.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just like, nope, she's just going to be fine. Then Dexter's going to leave the room, and then he's going to come back, and she's going to be completely done. And then he'll just dump her in the... Right. Which, again, is an utterly selfish act.
Yep.
To steal her from the hospital and dump her in the water.
Wow, man, you're like jogging my mind of things I want to say. Let me. I think it's really important while we're talking about the finale is This finale aired in parallel to the Breaking Bad finale. This
Yeah.
aired a week before the Breaking Bad finale, and to see what a shit show this show was compared to Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad finale was, to me, one of like I'll remember where I was when I watched it, because it was so like, what the fuck's gonna happen? What the fuck's gonna happen? Dexter was like, who fucking cares what happens? Just end it. I want to say you had said, what a if Dexter left something behind or whatnot to start a season. If you're a fan of the show, the premise. So meaning, if I was talking to you at the end of season 7 and I said, how do you feel about season 8? You're excited because you're like, all right, there's pieces there the show can work with to make a great season 8. It was supposed to be it was set up perfect, and then they just shit all over it to the point of this finale. Who the hell cares what happens? It's just so slow and so I don't know. It really sets a bad taste in your mouth when a finale is supposed to earn. If you're going to have a sad ending, not a sad ending, how do you say that? If you're going to leave a bad taste in our mouth, an no, what's the word? Sopranos. That ending was like, it was earned. You could say what you want about it, whatnot, but it was fuck. I don't know how I feel about this. They didn't earn this ending.
No.
The show did not earn this half-ass lazy ending.
No, and because I think, because I got into a bit of a thing, like on AV Club. Mm-hmm. I like to read their TV reviews.
Yeah.
Like I'll watch a show and then I'll read the review and sort of, because it's like an essay, like a bit of analysis. Mm-hmm. And I kept noticing that like episodes of Dexter were getting like D's and F's in their scores.
Of course.
And whenever I see an F, I read it. I don't care what the TV show is. I need to see what that's about. So I did end up reading like a lot of these things about the last few seasons of Dexter. So if I've got my episodes correct, to the end of season 7, Deb kills LaGuardia?
Yes, in a storage container, kind of how Dexter was born. And she had the choice to shoot either Dexter or LaGuardia. She shoots LaGuardia. So you're right there.
And then, and that's the cliffhanger. So, are you on the assumption then that the next season is going to be like, because that's how Dexter was born, that's going to make Deb? They're going to be like serial killer siblings? Or... because I feel like... Because I did get, like, when I watched the episode, I got, like, a previously on Dexter, and I managed to sort of, like, piece together a bit of it. Mm-hmm. But, again, it was that sort of thing of, like, this is not a final season. This is just the brain surgeon, or whatever he was called.
Yeah.
This is just another serial killer. Like, this is very similar, this finale, to the finale of The X-Files.
Okay.
The X-Files finale is incredibly boring and incredibly slow, and it feels as though there should just be one more episode afterwards to sort of, like...
wrap it up.
Yeah, like, it's all sort of, like, build up to something, like, to the alien invasion, essentially. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, cool. So the next episode, the final episode, will jump to the aliens, and that will be the firework factory. And then with this, I was sort of watching it, and I was like, so it should be... I'm quite happy with a lot of it. Obviously, it's shite. But I'm happy with the idea that if you could have this episode as the second to last episode, and when Dexter kills Saxon with the pen, he gets arrested. And then the final episode, maybe at the end of this episode, he breaks out of prison, and the final episode, Hurricane Laura's there. He's got rid of Hannah and Harrison, and he's on the run in Miami from the cops who he's worked with. And, I don't know, Deb's not dead, or she is dead, or whatever. And then you end with, like, him getting arrested or getting killed by the cops or something like that. And you're like, cool. Yes, the show's been shit for a few years, but that's a strong ending, because that's what people want.
Right.
Like, it's like the How I Met Your Mother ending, where you're like, you only need to have him meet the mother. Don't balls that up. And then they did. And this is like, Dexter needs to get caught. They need to know that he's this guy. And they don't. Because in the end, he dies, not necessarily a hero, but it's like, well, I'm sorry, there was, like you say about laughing out loud watching it. When Hannah's in Argentina and she's got her iPad and it's like the Miami news and it's like front page news, forensic tech dead. Like, It's a fucking hurricane. Loads of people will be dead.
You
Why
know,
would this guy warrant this?
the show, the pilot we just discussed about, and there's a lot of. Here's the thing with Dexter: if you're gonna present this to us as a show, you're gonna use real characters in a somewhat real world. You know, you can't ask us to turn a blind eye to something like a guy who works at a police station being front page news. So
Yeah.
they had real problems with that we just had to accept. You know, Dexter kills a serial killer who shot his sister, and they just let him flee the country. The police station just says, "Go ahead, you're good, you're one of us." And I say that to say that, you know, there was just such a struggle. You know, man, there was just so much of it that this show entertained the idea that Miami is just a breeding ground for serial killers. You know,
Yes.
Texas, there was, you know, there's just regular crime there. But in Miami alone, there was the Ice Truck Killer, the Trinity Killer, the Barrel Girls, the Doomsday Killers, Oliver Saxon. They all just happen. And listen, I'm from Miami's small. Like, Miami is not, you know, Miami's not this one big, you know, area where there's just serial killers everywhere. But the problem is, if you're going to ask us to believe some of it, you know, at what point does that extend to? When you had just brought up 3 finales, you brought up How I Met Your Mother, X-Files. Was there another one? Well, let's just say the 3 of them and include this one, Dexter. You know, just while you were talking, it has to lead me to think. And while Breaking Bad got it so right, you have to think the writers get inside their own heads because they're trying to outthink the room.
Yeah.
Because if when I was watching this finale, the first thing that came to my mind is this is never what I expected the finale to be. No. You know, when you're talking TV shows with your friends and you do this kind of stuff, you're just like, oh man, that last episode, Dexter's gonna be on the run and how's he gonna do this? You never start out he's in a fucking airport. You know, I think there has to be some of, and you do this, you know, you're however many episodes in. There has to be some finales, if you go back, is the writers outthink themselves. They you know, they kind of miss their own mark.
That's very true. There is a sort of sense of like sometimes a show gifts a writer a finale. Like How I Met Your Mother, easy. This, you know, if that, like we say, if the finale should be, because it's sort of that thing of like, if you think, okay, I keep jumping to other shows, but if you think of like a show that's on telly at the moment, and you think of like Game of Thrones,
right? And
if you say to someone, how is Game of Thrones going to end, and they can't exactly tell you, but they can give you the color, so they can say, oh well, so and so needs to be on the Iron Throne, and this needs to happen, and this needs to happen, and this needs to happen, and then I'll be satisfied.
Right.
And then the problem is, like you say, you do have that. Again, Breaking Bad, perfect example of the sense that the show just had to kill certain characters, save certain characters, and do some other stuff, and that's it, and it did it all. Like, that's why I think people love that so much, because the writers got out of their own way and just said, cool, this is what people want, let's just do it, just sweep the board. Whereas How I Met Your Mother, they were like, oh, well, everyone's expecting him to meet the mother, but we won't make it about that, we'll make it about something else. Like, no, fuck that. People want what they want. They don't want to be tricked, and they don't want to feel like their time has been wasted. And that was the problem with this, and that was the problem with How I Met Your Mother. You just felt like they just wasted your time.
And I just think they simply, if the writers were that good for that long, you just have to imagine that they kind of just outthought the room, and that this is what they ended up giving us. They thought, it's just like you said, if we weren't expecting this, you know, we get that instead, and that's kind of like a fuck you to the viewers, because you know, we're expecting one thing, but shit.
Yeah, and it's because sometimes, obviously, in a show, like midway through a show or in an episode or early on, and you kind of like, you think you know what the show is and it zigs instead of zags, cool. If you're like the broad premise, and again, like I say, it's that thing about a show like promising you something, so it has to give you that, because that's your reward for watching the show.
Exactly. You
know, Dexter, you're sort of like, I'm watching this show because I want to see the bit where the bottom falls out and Dexter's like on the run from the police, and then that never happens. You're like, well, then why did I watch the show?
Yes. What was I bothering with this entire time if this is what you were going to give me? Sean, I feel like we've been bashing the finale for a little bit, And
Okay.
I truly, as a Dexter fan, I do think there were some actually positives to come out of this. I
Okay.
remember watching it, and up until again, how do I say? If it's almost if I gave you a plate of shit and you just have to cook it.
Yeah.
So that's this finale, and up to about the final 20 minutes, there were things where it's like, all right, despite everything you've done, there was some positives because what they were giving, it was just okay. Everything seemed like it was. You knew a few episodes ago Dexter was never getting caught. If
Yeah.
anything, and one of the biggest problems with the show is Dexter never suffered any consequences. It's something you keep saying that it's selfish. They never held his feet to the fire. He always managed to slip away. And here, Deb gets killed. Hannah now has to raise Harrison by herself, and Dexter's all by himself, and that's fucking selfish.
Yeah.
Here I am. I'm already bashing it. I'm trying to give it positive. Man, I can't even do this. Everything that was leading up to this point, there's a beautiful shot of Dexter taking the boat out for the last time.
Yeah.
And it's a real nice nod to the series. There's a point, too, where they kind of give you this quick glimpse of the ice truck killer.
Yes.
And that's like a nice, that's a nice like, thank you. Thank you for giving us the viewers who, like you said, if I invested 8 seasons, thank you for giving us a little bit of that. It goes right to shit because the guy knocks out another guy in a full parking lot where everyone's doing hurricane preparation and no one even says, hey, that man just hit that man really hard. Let him take his car.
Yeah, it is that sort of like weird cartoon logic, isn't it? Where like people can just do whatever they want to do and it's fine. And like I think like that sort of culminates in that scene where Dexter stabs the dude in the neck, Saxon, and then like very calmly presses the button, but then pretends that he's all panicky. But then Angel and I can't remember the dude's name. Quinn, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. They watch the video, and like you say, it's like, okay, yeah, we've got everything we need here. You can go. You're like, can he fuck go? There will 100% be like internal affairs. He's got to at least fill out a statement. Like, nah, mate. It's like, oh, you only work here for another week. Hit the bricks. Go for it. Like,
the show played with Dexter being allowed to work on cases with Deb. They use it so conveniently because there was a certain point where, they say, Deb, you're off the case. You can't be involved in a courtroom. And I don't know if that's true or not, but you can't have a sibling tie in that. But fuck, and here we are in the finale. Dexter killed a man in a police station. I'm reiterating what you said, on camera.
Yeah.
And it's just like you said, what do you mean? You can't go. You just killed a man. You have to... This Oliver guy, he's not guilty. There's a whole process we have to go through in the United States courts. Yeah. He's a suspect. And you just killed him.
Cell. Yeah. He's only being kept until his lawyer arrives. Essentially, he's just a man off the street. Like, he's just a suspect.
He literally is. And how they catch him is in the hospital. If you go back, they caught him as a suspect. And Dexter just killed a man. And it's, no. You're free. You're not even free to go home. You're free to flee the country.
Yeah. I mean, and also as well, again, like you say, I did read some trivia that came out a few months after the show had finished, where basically the network said you're not allowed to kill Dexter. Like that's the rule.
I never read that.
And I just actually saw that on IMDb as well.
That's interesting.
That was, and now I don't know whether that is the same as like they've sort of said, oh, you can't kill him and you can't put him in prison. He has to get away.
Right.
Because you'd think that like you could have a scene where for whatever reason Dexter finds himself in a room with Saxon, and it's all fine, and then Saxon just goads him, and you just have the voiceover of Dexter just being like, "Fuck it," picks up a pen and he stabs him, and he's very calm and all that, and he gets arrested, and that's the end. He's broken his own... Well, not broken the code, because obviously the Saxon is a bad guy.
Right.
But he's just like... He's lost control, and he's killed this dude, and he's in jail. And then that's just sort of how it finishes, It's just like, after all this like meticulous OCD covering his tracks, in the end, because this guy killed Deb, it's too much for him to bottle up. So he kills him, and that's how he gets arrested, and that's the end.
Yeah.
And that's it. But instead, it's like, nah. Why is Dexter watching the surveillance video with them? You know what I mean? Why is he in the room? Why is he not in cuffs?
Yeah, why isn't he?
It's
Shit,
absurd. It's just like, did they find him? Like, oh, come upstairs. We'll just see what you've done. Oh, Dexter, shouldn't be doing that, mate. Oh well, get going. You're gonna miss your flight. Like, for fuck's sake.
And you know what's funny is that is not even the most absurd thing in this episode. What we're talking about, I'm telling you, when I remember the reaction after, and what we're talking about, it wasn't even like one of the main what the fuck did I just watch? Because if you remember this finale, and let me say really quick, and I don't want to get off my point, this show, and we've been talking about other finales, we have a finale that ran for 8 seasons, which is pretty long in terms of other shows. This show ran for 8 seasons. They had to introduce 3 new characters in season 8 in order for this show to run. Now, wow. I know the final however many minutes boils down to Dexter and Deb, but this show, this season 8, they introduced 3 new characters that we're supposed to care about, but no one does, because Saxon's going to get killed, and all that. Can you refresh me, because I already lost my train of thought of where I was going prior to the season introduce other characters. Oh, the most ridiculous thing in this show.
Yeah.
So we have Dexter, who just killed an innocent, a suspicious man on camera, and that's not the most ridiculous thing. I don't know hospitals. I know where this hospital, the first few episodes of Dexter was shot in Miami, then it moved all to California, Long Beach. I remember. It moved out of Miami after, I guess after they got picked up, they just had to go shoot in California and whatnot. And California, Los Angeles, Long Beach makes for a great Miami stand-in, because they do CSI Miami also in Long Branch.
Okay.
But let me say, so Dexter, he drives his fucking boat
I was gonna say.
up to a hospital during what they're supposed to be preparing for a hurricane.
Yeah.
And not only does he park the boat at the hospital and he's just free to get there, there's no other boat there, he could walk in again, he kills another person, rolls her right out, right off the dock, and no one says or does anything. There's chaos. He just rolls a dead woman out of the hospital and no one even blinks twice.
Yeah, I mean...
Maddening.
At least, okay, the boat thing, I did watch that and I was like, is that a Miami thing?
No.
Did you just boat around? No, surely not. But, okay, that thing I can't fix. That is just a mess. But, you could have... it seems like it's just laziness. Because, literally, have him unplug poor Deb's machine, and then he just, there's a lab coat on a hanger, and he throws it on. And people just think he's a doctor. Done.
I never even
But
thought
instead
of that.
he's in his murder clothes. Just tootling along with this woman on a stretcher. And who's supposed to have guards on her door? But I guess, I suppose Saxon's dead by then, isn't he?
Yeah. But I mean, you go in a hospital, I don't know how the hospitals are by you, but I just can't walk out. Let me say this, all right? I'm a funeral director, and about my pot. I'm a funeral director, and I go in hospitals sometimes to remove bodies.
Yeah.
Not only do I get escorted by a police officer, I get stopped quite a few times. Just excuse me, where are you going? And I'm in a suit, and I have the right to be there.
Yeah.
Dexter's there in a fucking thermal, just rolling a dead body out. You know what, too? You know what's not even like. Do you know how expensive those hospital beds are that he's rolling out? That's just expensive. He's just stealing it.
Expensive. Fucking dead hard to move, and it's she's hooked up to a variety of machines. My niece was a few years ago. She was really ill, and she spent loads of time in hospital, and we'd go visit her all the time. And if she had to move, if that bed had to move from one place to another, it was a good couple of people who had to get involved moving it.
Right. Yeah.
Because a hospital bed is such a big humpty bastard thing with all its electronics and stuff like that, and there is no way that I'm going into the hospital dressed the way Dexter was, and I'm going to get anywhere near moving that bed. I couldn't get on the ward. People are always going to because it's a hospital,
right?
But I think they're probably trying to cover it with people are so distracted by
the hurricane and I'm telling
prep.
you, and I I don't. There's no reason why you would know about this, but here down in South Florida, Florida rather, we just went through a hurricane warning, and we kind of had to do the whole big build up. The media, it was meant to be a hell of a lot stronger than what they were telling us it was going to be really strong, and it ended up being just wind and rain, which thank God.
Right.
So I went through hurricane prep. It's not that crazy that you can roll out a dead body.
Yeah.
It unfathomable. Maybe during the hurricane, where there's actual stuff happening, that's a different thing. But this is prep. This is everyone. We're moving everyone out. Just fucking insane. There's no way. No way.
It's like you say, it's that thing of like, I'm always fascinated with this in the sense of like TV, because TV is not written in a vacuum. It's not like sometimes it is, but this show, 8 seasons in, one person did not write this episode by themselves.
Right.
There's a writer's room. They've pitched the entire season. And also, with it being the finale, you'd sit there and that's the episode you think to yourself, well, that's the one we've got to nail. Because if the rest of the season is a little bit shaky, but we can pull off like a really strong finale,
right?
People forgive backwards. They'll be like, I think an example of that would be Twin Peaks. Like Twin Peaks, the second season is shaky, but the finale is so good that it cements the show as a classic.
Right.
So when people say to you, "Oh, should you watch Twin Peaks?" Like, "Oh my god, yeah! First season's amazing. Start of the second season's a bit shaky, but stick with it because the finale's great." If the finale's crap, then you just say, "No, don't watch any of it.
It's not even worth it." Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing with like How I Met Your Mother. Like the ending of that show was so bad, it reverberated backwards for me, and I just saw how bad the show was. If it had ended well, I would have been like, yeah, that was cool. That was a cool 9 seasons, and it was good at parts, and it was okay at parts, but I enjoyed it.
Right.
Now, if I see it on TV, like even early seasons when it was pretty good, I was like, no, get that off. I hate it. And I think that's the thing with Dexter. Like even today when I was watching the pilot, in the back of my mind, I was always thinking, no, remember, this show does go pretty bad.
Right.
Don't get hooked back in. And then when I watched the finale, it sort of made me think back on the pilot and be like, yeah, the pilot was good, but I wouldn't watch anymore. And I think, so a writer's room, they should be like, let's not make silly mistakes. Let's get this tight and good and not have a scene about people trying to like maneuver themselves in an airport. There was like no tension there at all.
There's none.
There's nothing, and like just so many scenes where I was like, why is this in the finale? The finale should be like go go go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it should be. It should right off the bat. It should be. Oh shit! I remember checking my timer of when I was watching the TV and just being like, "There's 20 minutes left. There's 10 minutes left." Is someone going to come out of the background and we deal and nothing ends up happening. What did you think as someone who kind of you kind of stuck to your first and last? What did you think about when the flashbacks between Dexter and Deb when he's in the hospital with the baby? Because as what I was trying to say before was I did think that was somewhat a nice nod to the series. It was something I remember watching it being like, oh wow, this was kind of cool to see that, because that part kind of gets glossed over of when Harrison was born, and trying to give the finale some positive. I did like those flashback scenes because it made Dexter human, quote unquote.
Yeah, no, and they were good, and it sort of as well reminds you, because I think they did that very well because they had the 2 flashbacks, didn't they? So I think they had the flashback when she was still alive, and then they had one when she was dead.
Right.
And I think that does well to sort of get Dexter to a point. I think the thing is okay, so I'm going to have to like mix a positive with a negative.
Okay.
So the flashback where, he's holding the baby and he sort of says to her, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what I'm going to do, and she sort of reassures him. Like, I thought that was a really good flashback to sort of like show how heartbroken he is over Deb. And then it makes sense that I think straight after that he goes to the hospital, he goes to the police station, he kills Saxon. But then, so I think that sort of ties into what I was saying earlier about this idea that they were very close to sort of having Dexter's mask slip and him just kill Saxon. but they chickened out and made it self-defense. So Saxon
Right.
stabs him first, and he stabs Saxon, so that's how
Right.
he gets away with it. And it's that sort of thing of like, no, it doesn't matter. This is the finale. You need to stop trying to like have the safety net. So just have him go in and just brutally murder Saxon. You know, he's just killed his sister. You've just seen a flashback showing how close he and his sister were. Just have him go in and rip him to shreds. And that be the sort of like the whole thing of like, to go first to last, like the first episode is all about how he's controlled, he's got no feelings.
Right,
If he
right.
had
That's
any
a great
feelings,
point.
they would
Yep.
be really towards Deb. So that comes full circle at the end because this guy kills Deb, who's done nothing wrong. So he brutally murders the guy in a police station, breaks all of Harry's rules because he wants vengeance, and it's a big emotion. But they don't give you that.
They don't. It's great. It's great how you're saying it in your book ending it, where he's so controlled. He has a rule. He has a code in that pilot, and how in this this finale they don't just make him how it's kind of ruined his world because he had to break every single code because his world, Deb, was killed. I mean, we are making a better finale just fucking talking on a podcast right now than what we got.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, and that's just like, this is just off the top of our heads. We're not.
Yeah.
We're not living it.
There's a
You know,
lot
we're
of
not
good.
in the room.
There's a lot of good people who kind of after season 7 ended, because like I said, season 7 ended with the premise for season 8 was like, all right, we're gonna get that season we wanted, and it just went to shit right off the bat. There's a lot of good people out there, smart people who had written their version of the finale, and there's some really great ones where reading it, I was like, oh shit, I want this. But just how we're talking now, if we sat, I mean, dude, I guarantee if we sat down, I don't know if you're a writer, I'm not, but I guarantee if we sat down and we flushed some stuff out, I have to imagine we could come up with something somewhat better than this.
Yeah, see, you've got to wonder, was it studio mandate? Did the studio get involved and try and like mess with it? Was it producers? Was it actors having too much power? Or, because I want to come back to something you said earlier, was it something where like just a showrunner who just got too much sway and just said, no, I've got this, and they wrote it all by themselves and just messed it up? Because the showrunners changed after 4th season, did you say?
It changed after the 4th. I believe Scott Buck took over, and I believe he took it over for the next few seasons. This show really jumped the shark at season 6. Season 6 is where it was. It's when season 6 started. There's no fucking way I just watched what just happened. Like, there's no way they're expecting me to believe it. Season 5 was on the teeter. It's either or. If you love Dexter, you'd be like, yeah, that was all right. It wasn't great, but I'll stick with it. If you were on the fence, kind of like how you were, season 5, you'd be like, no, this is crap. Season 6 just started taking stuff and, so lazy. If you think this is lazy, I highly recommend season 6 because that shit's lazy. But to your point about the showrunners, so Scott Buck, after the finale aired, Scott Buck, and he came out with this YouTube video that was like sponsored by Showtime where he explained the finale. I don't know if you had gotten a chance to watch it, but
no,
he kind
watch that,
he kind of explained every little detail and how he ended up. He mentions, and there's a part in season 3 where Deb is like, if I'm ever in a vegetative state, you got to kill me.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, it's not like they were so smart and they planted that seed 5 seasons ago. Like, no, it just happened to be, and it fit in. That's kind of why we get this shit ending. But so there's that point, and he speaks about that and how they say all serial killers end up in Oregon. I don't know if you know that, but they say it's like a pop. It's not a breeding ground, but it's kind of where they end up. For whatever, and that's why they put. Is it Portland, Oregon? Shit, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's Oregon, and that's where serial killers end up, and that's why Dexter ends up there. That this is supposed to be Oregon, and he explains it and whatnot. It's kind of like a half-ass attempt at an explanation, but it's Showtime's best explanation. But like as I was teasing earlier, that Clyde Phillips, that he was the showrunner, he let out this little thing right after the finale aired of how he would have ended it, and 11 episodes before our finale, I don't know how he would have managed to pull this off, but he said his own ending, yet he would have, how he would have ended it was the ending. The last scene is Dexter wakes up, and we kind of see. We think the audience. We think it's a dream.
Right.
And what we actually see is, the camera kind of flips, and Dexter's in the what do you call that chair? The death injection. No, what is that?
Oh, okay, yeah, the lethal injection chair.
Lethal injection chair.
Like the
he's
bed,
in the chair,
yeah.
and he's about to get killed. And when he looks in, because if you remember, well, if it wasn't in the pilot, but in one of the first episodes of season 1 is Harry takes Dexter to see someone get killed, and there's a room.
Yeah.
There's a room where you see a bunch of people. It's, presumably it's a family seeing whatever.
Yeah.
And he says in the room where Dexter's right before he's about to get killed is all the big serial killers that he's killed. So in that room you have your Trinity, you have Dokes, Lila, Rita, his brother, the ice truck killer, LaGuerta. They're all there. And what happens is Dexter kind of blinks, and that's like his life flashes before him. And that's how we get it. How he gets caught, he didn't go into that, but he just said that would have been my last scene. That everything Dexter has done, that's the end he gets.
Yeah, and that's the thing I was saying before about like acting with no safety net. Like, do something a bit wild. Like this finale, like we've said, boring, nothing happens, incredibly safe, and just doesn't resonate at all. So, like, think about. Okay, I know most of this episode is me referencing other endings of TV shows, but like. Think of like the ending of Lost. Like the ending of Lost is absolutely ridiculous, but it's very emotive and very interesting and starts discussion.
Right.
Whereas this is sort of like there's always people. There will be someone who likes this ending for whatever reason. Like sometimes people have that sort of Stockholm syndrome. Like you've watched the show for 8 years,
right?
So you've just got to like it. But there's nothing to sort of like talk about or pick apart. Once it's over. It's over. Mm-hmm. There's no longevity to it. The show doesn't continue. It has no legacy.
Just how we were saying earlier about how Dexter, he only kills bad people. He kills a clearly bad person in this episode. There's no should he have killed Saxon or not. And again, and you're just saying there's nothing to talk about. It's Dexter. Yeah. If you want to say he should have killed Deb or not, or be in a vegetative state? I mean, so be it. But right, there's nothing to discuss. Dexter killed the bad guy. Everything else sucked.
Yeah, well, actually saying that, even if, like, obviously he killed Deb, and, like, that's someone, like, okay, that's an innocent he's killed. But he isn't killing her. It's a mercy killing. He's putting her out of her misery.
Right.
And you sort of, like, I didn't feel, as soon as I realised what was happening and he was going to switch the machines off, I was like, well, yeah, obviously. Put the poor woman out of her misery. Like, there wasn't a thing of she was alive and about to start confessing stuff and he put a pillow over her face or something like that. Like, again, it was that sort of, there was no, obviously euthanasia is a grey area, but in terms of a TV show, you're like, no, they established, like, that doctor who was terrible established very, very strongly that she was dead, that she was brain dead.
Yeah.
She can't think, she can't reason, she can't talk, she can't see, she can't do this, she can't do that. Like, okay. So there's no sort of thing of like she's going to be rehabilitated or she's going to be slightly brain damaged. Yeah. They've established that she is, to all intents and purposes, dead. So he's not really killing her. He's just putting her out of her misery. So again, Dexter is the good guy, the best guy.
My biggest gripe with the show, if I had to just capsule it in 1 or 2 sentences, is Dexter never suffered any consequences. And just like how you keep going back to other finales, I'm going to parallel it with Breaking Bad. Walter White suffered so much for his crime, for his doing. I'm not even going to say crime. What Walter White did, he suffered for what he did, and he also gained for what he did. Obviously, Dexter, everyone around him suffered. He never suffered up until the last moment where he's out there isolated, all by himself. He never suffered anything. And that's a horrible show premise. Your main character doesn't suffer anything.
Well, that is I mean that's the thing, isn't it? Like there's something to be said about the entertainment of a character overcoming adversity. Like that is drama. That is all drama is. It's a character who is doing one thing there's an obstacle, they overcome it. That is everything that's ever happened.
Right.
But to have, like, I mean, the closest thing I can think of is, from what I watched, was... Well, actually, they found all the dead bodies, didn't they? I think in season 2. They find all the bags with the body parts in it.
Well, here...
And they sort of close in on some sort of killer. But I don't think... I think the closest thing is, like, Dokes gets a bit close to him and he kills him, and that's it. And then that never comes up again.
Yep, and again, like you said, they just hit that reset button. So by season 3, the first episode, Bay Harbor Butcher who? Season 2 who? It's like it never even existed. God, I'm going to lose my train of thought because I was just talking. Fuck myself. Shit, we were just talking. You were just saying there's no reset button, and shit, I hope you edit this part out because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about now.
Yeah, no worries.
That's what I wanted to say is that there was no... No, go fuck myself. I don't know what I'm saying.
Okay, well, should we? Okay, let's move towards wrapping it up then, because I think we've both lost our minds trying to talk about this bullshit finale.
If I could add one more thing about how ridiculous this finale is, it's happened with season 5, and I'm gonna mention it here in the finale. Hannah is on the run and wanted by U.S. Marshals. She is a wanted woman.
Why? Did she do a crime that she didn't really do or something, or is she a baddie?
She poisoned Deb at the end of season 7 and almost killed her.
Oh.
But what happened was Dexter turned her in for other crimes she committed. Obviously she didn't kill Deb, but she killed other people, and Dexter kind of held the golden key of whether or not to keep her. But like this stupid fucking show does, Hannah gets arrested, and a few scenes later she escapes custody. She manages to get out of jail. So just talk about all the laziness of this show. But she gets out, and that's why she's on the run. And at first there's that tension between Deb and Hannah, but in the end it just ends up that, Dexter's back in love with her, so she's wanted. But to my point, that Yvonne Strahovski, I believe is how you say her name, beautiful woman, tall, long-legged, and blonde. Mm-hmm. Why don't you dye your hair or wear a hat? Why are you in the airport looking beautiful with your blonde hair? Season 5, the premise is blonde girls, and at no point does the main character, the special guest in season 5, dye her hair. It's such a small. As the viewer, you're just like, excuse me, Hannah, dye your hair, wear a hat, wear glasses, and all right, it's a TV show, so be it. But I mean, God, it's just such lazy writing, such lazy writing.
Yeah, it's such an easy. It's almost like a thing where it's an easy scene as well. You just literally have her in another room just dyeing her hair or cutting her hair or whatever. And like in like the Bourne Identity, there's a whole scene with them like changing their hair, and it's a cool little sequence because you're like, oh yeah, so now they're in disguise and so on. And it's a cool thing because obviously that actress, like I only know her from Chuck, which I only watched the first and last of for a podcast. I haven't watched any more of it. Okay. And the second she came on screen, I was like, oh, it's the girl from Chuck. So if I can think that, someone who's been looking at a wanted poster for a while is instantly going to recognize her.
And she's wanted. She's definitely wanted. She's not a suspect. She's wanted for killing. And let me just be a big, blonde, beautiful woman. Yeah.
And also as well, like the guy who's waiting for her at or trying to find them at the airport, and he's just like trying to phone the marshal. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a fucking airport. Every person there is security. If you go to an airport in the modern age, 90% of what you see is security. So she's probably ordered the tickets in her own name because there's no talk of an alias.
Yeah, we're
that
bypassing
she's going to Argentina.
All of that.
Yeah. How ridiculous! They're just like, okay, well, we've got an escaped convict in the prison, so in the airport. Go on the white courtesy phone or whatever. Oh god, stupid. Ridiculous. Okay. Anything else? Any last words? I think I'm done.
I honestly, I could go on and on because there's so many little moments throughout the seasons, but I mean, we'll be extending this to first this fucking Dexter show. I love it and I hate it, and last, but I'll leave it at that for now.
No, I think that is very much like people who I've spoken to about Dexter. There is very much that sense of it is one of those shows that probably it runs for 8 seasons. Probably the first 4, I think, is what I usually hear. A quality, like up until Rita gets murdered. Spoilers.
Right.
It's pretty solid. Like it was always quite cheesy and it always went a bit weird and it was always a bit silly, but it was enjoyable. And then apparently, like from 5, 6, 7, 8, if this finale is anything to go by, it just completely loses its mind. I can.
It's just as insane. It really. It's not even. It's fine. And like you've been saying, it's not even like the show dips in quality. Because when you watch that finale and you think about the pilot, you're like, well, this show was always fucking silly. Like it was always like that. The show never dips in quality. It starts asking you as the viewer to make huge leaps. Yeah. Again, I'll go to Breaking Bad. The biggest thing is a selling point of Breaking Bad is this could happen. There is a world where this could actually happen. Dexter takes that, and it gets to the point where you just have to say Dexter is such an immortal, and he don't worry about him getting caught because it's never going to happen. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's also that sort of playing that long game of. It's very entertaining, the idea for the first couple of seasons that he works in the police station and he interacts with homicide detectives all the time, but they can't see who he is.
Right.
But again, that can only go so far before you're like, no, someone has to make it. So, I mean, you can get around that. I guess you have the show set in Miami for a couple of years, then he moves to somewhere else.
Right.
And you reset it, and you sort of then, he gets like, whatever, Rita dies, so he moves to somewhere else, and then you can sort of hit the reset button, bring in some more cast, move it around a little bit, and sort of reboot the show, and then give it a chance, but it can't continue with the same characters.
Yeah, it can't.
Because that's where it just gets silly.
Mm-hmm.
Because too many people die who are around Dexter. They're too close to him. Well, the last thing I'm going to say, because I know one of the big problems with this show is that it aired on Showtime.
Okay.
And Showtime do have a reputation for, I think Weeds, they ran that into the ground.
Right.
Dexter did not have 8 seasons of television in it and got ran into the ground.
Right.
And Homeland. Homeland's a show that is actually quite similar to...
That's a great point.
When that finishes, I think that's definitely going to be a show that if I did an episode of that, I'm going to be making a lot of the same points.
Right.
I watched the first 2 seasons of Homeland, and it finished, and then I was going to start watching the third, but the break between the end of the second season and then the year until the next one started was enough for me to have a bit of a think about the second season and just be like, you know what, that wasn't very good. There was good bits, but it wasn't strong enough to maintain, and I don't need another year of that because I was thinking it's on Showtime, it's just going to run for 25 seasons and just go down and down and down and down. And that is what I've heard. It's one of those shows where if it's slightly good again, people lose their minds.
Right,
oh my
right.
God, there was this episode and there was 20 minutes in the middle that were fantastic. That's not enough to get me back into the whole thing.
Yeah,
and I think that is Showtime's thing. They don't have enough shows, and if they do get a hit, they will just keep going until they can't get any more out of it.
That's a great point. It's funny you're saying that. I don't know, just to further your point, I'm watching this show on Showtime called The Affair, and it's essentially a soap opera, but I'm kind of getting fatigued now watching it. And you were talking that, you kind of opened my eyes, and it's like, yes, they're doing the same thing. They did it with Homeland. I stopped watching Homeland. But yeah, it seems to be a common thread with Showtime. That's interesting. I never thought of that.
Yeah, I think they there is that difference between, where, if you have something, I guess, again, to use Breaking Bad as the example, after a few years, they sort of established an end point and then worked to that, and everything was quality. I mean, obviously, with Dexter, by all accounts, that eighth season is just terrible from beginning to end.
Right.
So it was just terrible, and it built to just a terrible finale. Whereas, obviously, to look at the last season of Breaking Bad, every episode of that is a classic.
Yeah,
so
every episode.
They could have still ballsed up the finale, but they would have had to really work hard to mess it up. They had such good momentum. They came into the end full of confidence, and they just battered it, and it was great. Whereas this, they just limped to the finish. It was just a dying man in the desert just waiting to go.
That's a great...
And I think that's it. When you get to the end like that, it's just always going to end.
Yeah.
Always going to end badly. Right, so, Victor, tell us a little bit about your podcast to finish us off.
Thank you, Sean. My podcast, I just started. I'm a few episodes in. My podcast is called Digging 6 Feet Under, and it's where I discuss the HBO show 6 Feet Under, through a funeral director lens. I'm a 10-year licensed funeral director, and I've always wanted to get into podcasting, and I thought talking about that show, because there's so much to talk about on an episode alone, and then I liked being able to add some, industry tidbits as someone who's, you could picture me as I'm David or Nate or Rico. That's my everyday life, and there's a lot of unknown about, I'll say dead bodies to make it sound sexy, but the funeral industry, there's a lot of unknown. So I like, I break down every episode, and I kind of, wherever I see something right or wrong regarding the funeral home or a body or embalming, I just kind of throw a tidbit in there. And if you know anything about 6 Feet Under, that show is dense. There's a lot there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's such an interesting insight, because like so many podcasts, like even my own podcast, like it is just someone who just watches TV or watches movies or something like that. But it's fascinating, that idea of like 6 Feet Under is itself. You could do a podcast about 6 Feet Under by itself. It's so dense. There's so much story. It's so interesting. But I love what you're bringing to the table in terms of like, this is a story about, not necessarily about you, I guess, but it's the world that you live in day to day.
Right.
That's fantastic. That sounds absolutely fascinating. I'm definitely. I think. How can people find you?
Right now, if you could find me on SoundCloud, I'm just under Digging 6 Feet Under. On iTunes, again, same Digging 6 Feet Under. I always welcome. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at just Digging Podcast. And as for right now, I'm starting out my little home base. I'm actually using a lot of Reddit. So if you join me on reddit.com/r/6 Feet Under, I kind of post there so we could have, if anyone has any thoughts or questions, really, I encourage anyone to just, tweet at me or join me on there and shoot your questions.
Fantastic. As usual, you can find me at From First to Last Pod on Twitter, and you can email me directly, as Victor did, at fromfirsttolastpodcast@gmail.com. Go to at Digging Podcast and follow Victor. And I mean, I think definitely that podcast, if you're a fan of 6 Feet Under, if you're a fan of 6 Feet Under, listen to the podcast. If you've never seen 6 Feet Under, this is your excuse to start. Watch 6 Feet Under, listen to the podcast. I'm all about that.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing, mate. Thank you for coming on to talk about this show. This episode's been fantastic and has ran for very long, and we have lots and lots to say. I could literally. I think I'm just looking at my notes and I can see things that I haven't mentioned, but I'm not going to start this up again.
I left a lot out. I know what you mean. I left a lot out.
Yeah, I just saw a note there that just said voiceover. Like, no, that's staying where it is. You can right off.
Join us on part 2 as we discuss this.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, man, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Sean. This was awesome. Thank you. Great podcast, and thanks for having me on.
No problem. Well, my name is Sean Fallon. This has been From First to Last. Goodbye.